Next up on Bible Walkthrough, is there someone, somewhere, waiting on the face of the earth, over 2,000 years old, hiding in a cave? Or maybe, was Jesus wrong? Is Jesus overdue? Matthew 24:34. Shall or shall not this generation pass until he returns? Welcome to Bible Walkthrough.
Let me read this for you. This is Matthew 24, starting at verse 32. Jesus is speaking. And he says, "Learn this parable from the fig tree. Whenever its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also you, when you see all these things, know that he is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." And our reader's focusing on verse 34. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And he's referring to a longer list in the scriptures of all the signs of the times. The heavens will be shaken, the Son of Man will appear. So there's a whole list of things that are going to take place.
Yeah.
That will take place before this generation. And specifically, and most problematic, is the return of Jesus. He says on verse 30, "They will see the Son of Man arriving on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." Taking place in this generation is basically how it sums up.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that mean there's somebody alive still waiting for Jesus to arrive because he's not going to pass away? Does it mean Jesus was wrong with the amount of time? Did he think he was coming sooner? These are all the questions that our viewer has. So, do you want to hit him up?
Yeah.
Right.
We can maybe work with a little bit of this.
All right.
The Olivet. This is in a section of text known as the Olivet Discourse, and it is Jesus's expounding of things about the last days. And it really starts, you got to understand, it starts here in verse 3, where it says, "And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives," that's why it's called the Olivet Discourse, "the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the day, end of the world?" So they're asking him a shotgun of questions. When will these things be? These things is all the stuff he's talking about, the judgment on Jerusalem and all this stuff in chapter 23. And not one stone not being left on another. And what shall be the sign of your coming, and what shall be the sign of the end of the world? And they're assuming that these things are sort of one event. Now, Jesus is talking across a scope of events, and he's talking about there's going to be all these troubles and false prophets, and people are going to hate each other, and it says the gospel will be preached to the whole world, and then they're going to see this abomination of desolation, and all these various and sundry events. Now, in this section of verse 34, when he says, "This generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled," the question is, which generation is he talking about? Is he talking about the generation that he's sitting in, this generation here? Or, this generation shall not pass until all these things shall be fulfilled would make it sound. And some scholars say that Jesus did say to his disciples that their generation would be the generation that saw all these events happen, and that it was a disappointment that the church reinterpreted it. I don't take that interpretation. I don't see that that's necessary. I think he's saying this generation, hegenea haute, this one, this generation. In other words, the generation that is in reference when I'm talking about these events. So whatever generation sees those events take place, that generation will not pass. In other words, this stuff is all going to go down within one generation. And I think what he's talking about is right there, verse 29, immediately after the trials of those days shall the sun be darkened and the moon. And that's when he's talking about, in that moment. I think that generation would not pass. And of course, there are a lot of cryptic things that Jesus said about whether or not people would endure to the end, like what he says about the Apostle John. What's it to you if he lives until I return? And therefore it went out that he would never die until that time. I think that's the kind of misinterpretation that contemporary scholars have done with this. That they've misread that. And I think he's saying this generation, the generation that sees this. What do you got?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's I don't agree with that translation that says that interprets this as Jesus saying that this generation was going to see Jesus return, speaking to the disciples at that time, and that is a great disappointment and stuff like that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't see Jesus as promoting that kind of a message. But the way I look at it, I just look up the word generation in my Greek dictionary, and generation has a couple different definitions to it. Online, it's pretty easy to get a lexicon, and I see we've got definitions from a generation to family to race itself, like a whole race could be the definition for this word. So did the human race pass away? Do we still have the human race? Is the human race going to be around when all these things take place? Well, that's a no-brainer for me. That's the definition I agree with. I fully believe that the human race is still going to be around to see Jesus return. And it's the same human race that was there when Jesus was speaking to them. So that's how I interpret it, and I like that definition.
I think he would say mankind. I don't think he would use Genea on that. But I think there's a point that you raised that could, and I'm just kind of picking this up from what you're saying. He's using a lot of Judaistic imagery. The imagery of the fig tree is used many times of Israel, the people of Israel, and their response to God's activity. And if he's talking about the lesson of the fig tree, I would think that if you're going to interpret it as a generation, like a race, a family, it would be possible to say this generation, the fig tree, the people of Israel aren't going to pass until all these things are fulfilled, because these are talking about prophetic kinds of things, the desolation, abomination of desolation from Daniel, the opening up of the fig tree again. And I think that might be a way of hearing that the fig tree that's going to arise again, Israel as a people group, Judaistic people, whoever that is that subscribes to Judaism, would continue to open up and to grow, and that budding fig tree would never pass until those things are fulfilled. I would say that that's within the boundaries of how to interpret this. I think it's really important to understand too, for those who are very much end of the worlders on this, when they do ask the question of when's the end of the world, and Jesus says in verse 4, take heed that no man deceive you. Many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars, and see that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end isn't yet. One of the conditions he puts in this whole discourse is that you'll see these signs, and that's not the end. Don't worry about it. And then he goes on to say the same sorts of things with wars and troubles and tribulations, and that it is the end over here. In this latter part of verse 28 and on. So he's talking multiple frames of time, and he's talking who's gonna see the end. Well, probably the people who start to see the end are going to see the end. And then perhaps I can hear you saying that this is a people group. That would be possible. But I really don't hear... I think it's pressing it to say that Jesus is somehow mistaken.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that really comes from an agenda.
Yeah, that's what I think so too. They got a purpose for that.
Yeah. And especially because he goes on to say, verse 36, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. And as in the days of Noah, it's just going to come suddenly and surprise everybody. So if he knew that it was going to be within this generation, he probably wouldn't say, but nobody knows. So if you're gonna say that Jesus knows and doesn't know, or that Jesus knows and then he's mistaken, it doesn't.
That's a
really
good
follow
point,
very well.
Adam. That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't notice that. It's good.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we hope that helps you. So have a fun time. Look for the fig tree. That'll help. What this does say, more than anything else, I believe, is he says, stay ready. And that's a big difference. There's a massive difference between trying to prepare as though your boss is going to come inspect and living your life as though your boss can inspect at any time. And his point is, stay ready. Live your life in a way that could be interrupted by an inspection anytime, because it's going to surprise you. So I think trying to unpack this text to try to determine when the end is counterproductive. It's counterindicative to the text. Jesus says you're not going to know. He just says just live in a way that's going to be able to be interrupted and audited.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's good. Yeah.
Cool.
Seems like he always leaves us with the idea that it might be us.
Mm-hmm.
We might be the ones who sees his return.
Might be the generation.
Yeah.
I'd like to be that generation.
That'd be great. I know we'll all get to see his return, but any way we see it, it's going to be good to me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave you with that hope and that dread. And we'll see you next text and next time on Bible Walkthrough. Thanks for tuning in.